Yes, well, to today's controversy feature, and we're discussing how the Attorney General, Suella Braverman, has come under fire for saying that schools are not legally required to cater to trans children. She told the Times newspaper, quote, "A male child who says in a school that they are a trans girl, that they want to be female, is legally still a boy or a male, and schools have a right to treat them as such under the law."
Yes, indeed. Why is this controversial? Is the Attorney-General being harsh? What do you think? Well, joining us to discuss this right now is Calvin Robinson, a former teacher and, of course, GB News commentator as well. Calvin, thank you very, very much for joining us. Are you struggling to see what's so controversial about saying that men are men and women are women?
I am indeed. I happen to have been a school governor with Suella Braverman, actually, at the Michaela Community School, fantastic school in Wembley, Brent. So I know she knows what she's talking about. This is nothing outrageous. She's just reiterating what the law already is. A child is a child. That child is either male or female, and a child cannot choose to change their gender because they cannot make such life-altering decisions until they're an adult. It's quite simple, really. The only difference here is that schools have been reminded not to take these decisions unquestionably. What's been happening is that children have said, my pronouns today, miss, are he, her, she, them, whatever, and the teachers have been taking that on board as if it's a fact, when it's clearly not.
I do want to pick you up on something you just said there. Your issue is with schools, taking these issues and accepting that a child is trans without questioning anything. I wonder if you think there are cases where it might be appropriate for a school to start referring to a child as the gender they want to identify as. Aren't there certain circumstances where it might be cruel to actually continue calling the child a male if they identify as a female?
No, we're born either male or female, and later on in life, as adults, if we want to go through a transition and become a trans male or a trans female, that is up to us as adults. But as a child, if they have gender dysphoria, which I believe is a real mental illness, then they need to be treated. They need to see a therapist. They need to have a conversation with their parents and with the school, keep the school in the loop. Fantastic. But what the school cannot do is take on board a child's delusions. And this is what we're talking about at the moment, because it affects the school uniform policy, it affects which toilets the child uses, it affects the sports that they engage in. It's more serious than just taking on board what someone wants to be referred to as. We've seen situations in the UK, in English schools, where a child has asked to be referred to as a horse, and the teachers have been encouraged to give the child carrots. Now, that's clearly an unquestioning approach to nonsense, and children will push the boundaries as far as they can, because that's what children do. It's not about them being naughty or...
Calvin, was that a real story, or were you just giving an illustration?
A real story. That's a genuine story.
Wow.
Okay, great. I suppose, well, if we're doing this, I suppose, then, can I identify as Paul Gascoigne and I'm allowed to play football and go to the pub all the time?
Or you can just identify as an A-star student, and then they have to give you A-star. I think this is a good system, actually, that you can use to your advantage. But Calvin, look, where do you think we're heading with this whole conversation around trans children, gender identity and things like that? Because the government are starting to slowly but surely come out against some of the craziness, I would say. But then again, you do have people, particularly in the opposition, like Stella Creasy, who will say what women can have a penis. Are you worried that if Labour do get into power, the direction won't go the way you might want it to?
Yeah, because Labour don't seem to know what a woman is anymore. That's very worrying, that a basic biological fact has been skirted around so publicly. It's because, I understand these people are well-intentioned. They really don't want to cause any harm or upset or offence. But of course, if you truly love people, if you truly want to be kind, you have to tell them the truth. There's no point lying to people's faces. And it's worrying when we talk about children in particular, because we've seen in Scotland at one point they suggested that 4-year-olds could determine their gender. And of course, we wouldn't expect a 4-year-old to be able to smoke, to drink, to drive, to make any other life-affecting decisions at such a young age, and to suggest that they actually know what gender is at that age. For a boy to be wearing a dress or a girl to be a tomboy, that kind of thing is normal at 4 years old. It's fine. They're experimenting. Puberty hasn't even taken place yet. They haven't got those hormones rushing through their bodies yet. So, of course, children should just be free to be children, and we don't have to put these labels on them and actually say, oh, maybe you're a transgender, or you're actually not a boy, you're a trans girl. All these things are wrong. And what they're actually doing is, rather than being kind, they are neglecting the children, and it is a form of child abuse.
OK, now I'm just going to move away from the school aspect of it and talk more about the kind of crime aspect of it as well. There is a police force, we're talking about this a bit later on, that's allowing criminals, or suspected criminals anyway, to identify as one of 67 different genders. And actually there was a report that came out over the weekend, we'll also be talking about this as well, which is, surprise, surprise, this has now finally happened. 2 inmates, one a man who's identifying as a woman, basically, and another a woman, got drunk, get this, on illegally made prison liquor, right? And then were found having consensual sex. So, I mean, this is really happening now, isn't it? We're allowing men into women's prisons and, shock horror, sometimes they have sex.
Well, thank God that was consensual, because the situation could be far worse, couldn't it? If we're letting males into female-only spaces, even if it's a prison, that's a dangerous concept, because we all know that for rape to take place, there has to be penetration. That means that a male with male productive organs needs to be there and enforce himself on a female with female productive organs. Those two should not be mixed in safe spaces, such as a prison. It's common sense. And we're getting to a point, all this self-identity rubbish is purely rubbish. If someone wants to go through a transition and live their lives as the opposite gender, that is fair play to them as a grown adult after years of therapy and treatment and all that kind of stuff. But we should not be putting mixing genders in places that are no longer safe. We've got to protect women's spaces.
Yeah, Calvin, look, thank you very much, mate. Always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Calvin Robinson, there,
Thank you, Calvin.
one of our very own political commentators now as well.